welcome to another Unity 5 tutorial. This is a beginner tutorial on how to create a first-person controller. Now, Unity comes with a whole lot of really well-built first-person controllers that you can drag into your environment and use straight away and start running around. So if we have a look at Assets, Import Package, and we go down to Characters, we will get a bunch of first-person and third-person controllers that you can put into your environment and use immediately. But we're not going to do this. I'm going to show you how you create one from scratch. So the reason that you would create one from scratch is because, first of all, you'll get to understand exactly how the controller works. And second, you'll have a good knowledge of what's in the code and the structure of the code, so that if you want to add customized behaviors into your character controller, you can do that quite easily. Whereas if you start with one of the prefabs from Unity, it can be quite confusing because there's a lot of code and there's a lot of bits and pieces that are all added that work together. But for this character controller, there will be 2 scripts and they will be really, really simple. Right, so the first thing that we need to do is create an environment. So I've got this quite elaborate environment. If you're following along, you only need to create a ground plane, but make sure it has a collider on it. So our character will be influenced by physics and gravity. If you don't have a collider, it will fall through your ground. Now, this model, which I got from the asset store here, it's one that Unity created, and it's actually really nice. So I've imported that, but be warned that one of these gangways doesn't have a collider on it. So once you start walking around, you might fall through the ground, which is not desirable. Okay, so we've got our level. We've got a camera and a directional light, which comes by default. So let's add in our character. So the first step is to create a capsule. Right click in the hierarchy and go to 3D object capsule. So here's our capsule. You can also add it through the main menu at the top by going game object, 3D object, and capsule will do the same thing. Now make sure the capsule is not attached to anything so that it's its own object. And to that capsule, make sure, first of all, that it's above the ground. And you can do that by dragging it down to see if it goes through. Yep, so about there. We're going to add a rigid body. It already comes with a collider, which is good. So let's add a rigid body. And let's run that to see what happens with the rigid body. Okay, so you'll notice that the capsule fell down, hit the collider of the ground and stopped moving. That's exactly the behavior that we're after with this. We want the physics system to take care of the gravity of our character. The next step is to attach the camera to the capsule, because we don't want to be looking at our character. This is first person, so we're actually looking out from the character. Grab hold of your camera and drag and drop it onto the capsule. This will make the capsule a parent object of that camera. Okay, now we need to align the camera with our capsule so that we're looking out from it. The easiest way to do this is to set the camera's position and rotations back to 0 after you've added it to the capsule, because its transform is relative to the thing it's attached to. So if I go up here now and just set this to 0, 0, 0, and 0 rotation, the camera will be zeroed in on our capsule, and you can see that now. The camera is facing along the same axis system as the character. So the character Z is this way, and so is the camera's. Now, if you want to move the camera around as far as the height that it is, oh, not the character, select the camera and then move it up to, where you want the eyes of your character to be, or how tall your character is. So we probably want it to be about there. Now, it doesn't matter if the camera is inside of the capsule, because there's no texture on the inside surface of a capsule. So we're actually looking out from it, and therefore you won't be able to see it. If you really don't want to see the capsule, you can select the capsule in the hierarchy and turn off its mesh renderer so that you only end up with the colliders. It will make no difference. It's just so that you can see where it is in the scene, basically, because you're never going to see it yourself in the game. All right, so we now have our first person set up. The next stage is to start moving the character around. Create for yourself a C# script called Character Controller, and in that we're going to add this code here. Now this code is based on code that I've used before, and it will look familiar. There is the granny mixer mode tutorials, also the car driving in the network tutorials. I use this same code over and over again because it always works. Now for the first person, I've made a few little rejigs with it so that instead of rotating your character around with the left and right arrow keys, you actually strafe from side to side. And we'll leave the turning around to a little bit later. So what's this code got in it? First of all, we've got our class name at the top here, which is the same as the file name. Next, we have a public exposed variable called speed, which you can then change the value of depending on how fast you want your character to respond to the keyboard movements or the controller movements. In the start function, I'm running this cursor.lockState equals cursor.lockMode.locked. That's a mouthful. And this code will turn off your cursor so that you don't see it on the screen, and it will also lock it so it stays inside of the game window, which is where you want it. Now, if you turn it off, you will at some point want to turn it on if you need your mouse back, especially if you're working in the Unity editor. It's a real pain if you lose your mouse. You can't stop the game from running with the mouse. So at the bottom of update, there's an if statement to say if we hit the escape key, then we're going to turn the cursor back into sort of its default mode. So we're turning off its lock state down here. Right, now the movement of the character itself is just very simply a translate. And that translate will strafe it along the x-axis, and it will translate it along the z-axis. So this variable I've called translation is actually the forward and backwards movement, even though strafe is essentially, it's a translation as well, but it's going to be doing the side movements. Now the translation and the strafe are coming from a get axis value, and it's getting the vertical axis and the horizontal axis. Now, where do these values come from? Well, Unity itself controls these values internally so that you can set up which keys or which joystick buttons or which mouse movements or whatever is going to make these values change. So they're like a global setting that you can assign to different commands on the keyboard. Okay, I'll show you where these are in a moment, but the next part after getting the value is actually to multiply each one by delta time. Now this will keep the movements smooth and also in time with the update. So an update loop does not run at exactly the same time each loop. It depends what else is actually happening in your game. So you can't say that the update runs every second, for example. It's just not going to happen. This delta time is the time between this update and the last time update ran. By using that as a multiplier on our translation, we can ensure that our character is moving smoothly and at the same rate. It's not going to sort of jitter around. We next use these two values in this translate, which I mentioned before, to push it on the X and to push it on the Z axis. All right, so save that code and I'll show you where these get axis values are set. So in the main menu, go to Edit, Project Settings, Input. Then over in the inspector, you'll see an axes area. Okay, and it's saying in this case that there are 18 of them already set. These are the default values. You can see at the top the horizontal and underneath that the vertical, and these are the two ones that we're using. So if you expand them out, you'll actually be able to see what buttons and keys are associated with the horizontal axis. And the horizontal axis, you can see here, is going to work with the left and right. Okay, so its negative movement will be left, its positive movement will be right. An alternative key is to use the A and D keys as well. Now, if you have a joystick connected or a thumbstick controller as well, if you're creating a mobile game, it's all set up ready to use that. Of course, you can change these keys if you want, but these are like the iconic keys for moving in these particular directions, and therefore you kind of want to keep them unless you have a really good reason to change them. Now, the vertical one is the same. You can see that it has the up and down arrow keys assigned to the negative and positive values that you're going to get, and the S and W. So you can use the WASD keys to move around with this system as well, and that's just by using the get axis for horizontal and vertical. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of other ones that are defined, like fire 1 is the left mouse button, and you also have mouse movement down here, and I do use this a little later on, these two mouse movements, when we start looking at rotating the camera around. Okay, so that's where all the axis values are. You don't have to change them, so don't worry about them. I just wanted to show you how they link back to the code. Right, now our character is this capsule, and we're going to drag and drop our character controller onto it. All right, there's our speed 10. We'll leave it like that, and let's press play just to try it out. Now I can move the forward key. Whoa, what happened there? And now I'm moving the down arrow key, and you can see it's trying to move me backwards, but gravity keeps bringing me back. Isn't that interesting? What's actually happening is the Rigidbody has taken control of us. So let me just hit escape because I need my mouse cursor back. I'll stop playing, and I'm just going to move the character right back here a bit, and I'll play it again so you can see what happens over here when I try and move forward. Okay, so as soon as I bump into something, the physics system takes over and my character rolls over, which is not what we want. This is a really easy fix. So we select our capsule and we come down to the Rigidbody and we look at the constraints, and we can actually freeze certain physics properties of our character so that it's not going to behave like that. Now, when it rolls over backwards, this one here, it's actually rotating around the x-axis, which is our red one, as you can see up here with the little gizmo. So this is the x-axis, which will roll us this way. Now, if we tip over this way from side to side, then we're actually rolling around our z-axis, which is the blue axis. If I click away from it, you'll see it goes blue. And remember, it aligns with what's going up here, so you can see the color system that is used for each axis. Anyway, we want to stop the physics system from rotating our capsule around the X and around the Z. So back over here in the inspector, we want to find the freeze rotation, and we're going to freeze the X and we're going to freeze the Z, because we don't want our character to fall over like that, because it's not what we want, and it's not ideal for our first person controller. So now let's run this and move forward. Now you'll see that the physics system is working all very well there, because I fell off the back. Let me just come back to here. That the little step up there, the collider part works well, and the gravity is obviously working really well. Now, I didn't move side to side to show you that either. So if we use the left and right arrow keys, that we will move side to side like that. But I can't turn. Right, so although you can't see my mouse, I am trying to move my mouse from side to side, and it's having no effect whatsoever on the capsule rotation. Okay, so we need to add some code onto our camera that will make it into a looking device so that we can look around, which is pretty usual in these sorts of controllers. So the code for turning the camera around is amazingly simple as well. Create yourself another C# file called cam mouse look. So camera mouse look. And I'll open that up and show you what's in here. So this file is the class cam mouse look, and inside it, it's got some really simple code that grabs hold of the movement of the mouse. And you can see in the update here where we're doing a get axis for the mouse X and the mouse Y values as they come in. But let's go back up to the start just to walk through the code. So first of all, we have this vector2, which is called mouse look. This is going to keep track of how much movement the camera has made. This input here only gets you the change of the mouse movement since the last update, but we need to keep track of the total movement so we can add it to our controller. Next, there's a smooth V, which is a 2D vector, which I guess it helps us to smooth down the movement of the mouse. You don't need to smooth it, but you'll find that it's really jerky. What you get, I guess it's the kind of like multiplying our movement by our time.delta thing. Then we have two values. We have sensitivity. So that's of course the mouse sensitivity, how much you have to move the mouse on the screen to actually get any movement out of your character, and how much smoothing you want. So you can play around by increasing or decreasing those values as is required. Next, we have a game object, which is going to point back to our character, because the camera is going to turn, but as it turns, it's going to control the whole body of the character as well, allowing us to turn and move around the environment, off in a different direction. We don't need to set this character. It's automatically set up in start. Character is set to the parent that the object that has this code is attached to, which is the camera. So the character is the camera's parent. That's what this is saying. Okay, so then in the update, each update, we get the movement of the mouse and the change of it. So this is like the mouse delta, I've called it. And that change in mouse is then multiplied by the sensitivity and the smoothing values. The smoothing vector is actually used to it's to smooth the movement, so it slows it down, but it also performs a lerp. So what a lerp does is a linear interpretation of movement, which won't instantly move your camera from facing one direction to the other. It will actually move smoothly between 2 points. That's the whole purpose of lerp. As you do more character and NPC movement scripts, you'll see that lerp is used a lot to move something between one point and another really smoothly, rather than snapping it from one point to the other. Now, our global value that we had before, this mouse look that's constantly adding up all of our movements so that we can apply it to the character, then has this smooth V attached to it, added to it, which is all of these calculations from moving and smoothing the mouse. Right, we then use this mouse look value, and we add the mouse look Y as a local rotation to the camera around its right axis. Let me just switch back to Unity to show you what's going on with that. So if I get my camera, the right axis, remember, is this red axis coming out here. It's the X axis. When we rotate around the X axis, we're actually moving the camera up and down like this. So if I hit the E key, I can rotate the camera around its red axis like that. So that is the movement around vector3.right for the camera. To move it around in this direction is to rotate it around the y-axis, the up axis. And when it rotates around the up axis, it's going to rotate the whole character. So let's go back to the code where we can see that happening. Now this minus here is an inverted system. So in your FPS controllers usually can have it working inverted or not inverted. By putting the minus sign here, we get the inverted system. The mouse look Y, so the mouse movement like this is used to rotate the camera up and down around the right axis or the x-axis. And then the mouse look X value, which is going to be our change in mouse as we're moving like this, is going to be used to rotate around the characters up, not the camera, because we want the whole character to move. Okay, so that's the cam mouse look script. Save that, switch back to Unity. You want to grab that script and put it onto the main camera. So there's the main camera. Let's drag the cam mouse look script on. And this is where you can change the sensitivity and smoothing as you like. Right, so the capsule has one script on it and the main camera has the other. Let's press play. And now as I move the mouse around, you can see that I'm looking. If you have a look over in the scene window, you'll see that the axis system of the capsule is moving. Actually, let me make that a bit clearer. I'll select the capsule and I'll come back into here. So the camera, as it moves up and down, is not changing anything to do with the character. But when the camera moves from side to side, the whole character moves around, which allows us to turn. So now I can control the camera just like a first-person system, which is what it is. And the rigid body attached allows us to walk up the steps, down the steps, and also to our own detriment if we walk off the end of the platform like that. All right, so that's all there is to creating a first-person controller, is those two scripts. Add one to the capsule, add one to an attached main camera, and you're done.